Okay, we are live. We are here with the great Tuesday Money of the Elephant Lounge podcast and vlog. Welcome, Tuesday Money.
I'm back. Yay.
And we're here to talk about Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. Brian Laundrie's notebook was found. And I think we're going to start with a little news clip. Here we go.
Now to some new and disturbing revelations in the Brian Laundrie Gabby Petito case. Several pages from Laundrie's notebook found near his body in Florida have been made public by his family attorney. Details now from ABC's Rena Roy.
It was a case that gripped the nation, and tonight, for the first time, we're hearing from Brian Laundrie in his own words after investigators say he murdered his girlfriend, Gabby Petito, during a cross-country road trip last summer. The FBI says Brian admitted to killing Gabby in this 8-page handwritten letter released by the Laundrie family attorney, but Brian claiming it was a mercy killing, that Gabby had fallen and was in pain. Writing in part, "I ended her life. I thought it was merciful, that it is what she wanted, but I see now all the mistakes I made. I panicked. I was in shock." Federal authorities say Brian strangled Gabby to death in Wyoming and returned home to Florida alone, sparking a nationwide search. Her remains later found near Grand Teton National Park. Brian and his family declined to speak with law enforcement or Gabby's parents. Brian then disappeared himself. Authorities say they found his body in a swamp near his family's home next to a notebook with that written confession saying he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Gabby's family has filed a civil lawsuit against Brian's parents, accusing them of intentional infliction of emotional distress. The Laundrie's attorney has called the case baseless and is seeking to dismiss it. A judge will decide whether the Laundries will face a jury within the next few weeks. Whit?
Rena Roy, our thanks to you tonight.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, so that's a little summation, but I wanted to start with going through the actual note that was found. Now, Gabby Petito's parents' lawyer, Pat Riley, says that this is in fact one of two notes that were found at the scene of Brian Laundrie's suicide. So this is the one that was released, and bear with me, it's a little long, but I think I can do this. Okay, here we go. Gabby, I wish I was right at your side. I wish I could be talking to you right now. I'd be going through every memory we've made, getting even more excited for the future. I can't live without you. I've lost every day we could have spent together, every holiday. I'll never get to play with Unintelligible again, never go hiking with TJ. I loved you more than anything. I can't bear to look at our photos, to recall great times, because it is why I cannot go on. When I close my eyes, I will be thinking of laying on the roof of the van, falling asleep to the sight of a meteor shower at the Crystal Geyser. I will always love you. If you were reading Gab's journals, looking at the photos from our life together, flipping through old cards, you wouldn't want to live a day without her. Knowing that every day you'll wake up without her, you wouldn't want to wake up. I'm sorry to everyone this will affect. Gabby was the love of my life, but I know adored by many. I'm so very sorry to her family because I love them. I'd counsel her younger siblings. I'd consider her younger siblings my best friends. I'm so sorry to my family. This is a shock to them as well as a terrible grief. They loved as much, if not more than me, a new daughter to my mother, an aunt to my nephews. Please do not make this harder for them. This occurred as an unexpected tragedy. Rushing back to our car, trying to cross the streams of Spread Creek before it got too dark to see, too cold. I hear a splash and a scream I could barely see. I couldn't find her for a moment, shouted her name. I found her breathing heavily, gasping my name. She was freezing cold. We had just come from the blazing hot national park in Utah. The temperature had dropped to freezing, and she was soaking wet. I carried her as far as I could down the stream towards the car, stumbling, exhausted, and shocked. When my knees buckled and knew I couldn't safely carry her, I started a fire and spooned her as close to the heat. She was so thin, had already been freezing too long. I couldn't at the time realize that I shouldn't have started a fire first, but I wanted her out of the cold, back to the car from where I started the fire. I had no idea how far the car might be, only knew it was across the creek. When I pulled Gabby out of the water, she couldn't tell me what hurt. She had a small bump on her forehead that eventually got larger. Her feet hurt, her wrists hurt, but she was freezing, shaking violently while carrying her continually made sounds of pain. Laying next to her, she said little, lapsing between violent shakes, gasping in pain, begging for an end to her pain. She would fall asleep and I would shake her awake, fearing she shouldn't close her eyes if she had a concussion. She would wake in pain, start the whole painful cycle again, while furious that I was the one waking her. She wouldn't let me try to cross the creek, thought like me that the fire would go out in her sleep and she'd freeze. I don't know the extent of Gabby's injuries, only that she was in extreme pain. I ended her life. I thought it was merciful, that it was what she wanted, and I see now all the mistakes I made. I panicked. I was in shock, but from the moment I decided, took her away her pain, I knew I couldn't go on without her. I rushed home to spend any time I had left with my family. I wanted to drive north and let James or TJ kill me, but I wouldn't want them to spend time in jail over my mistake, even though I'm sure they would have liked to. I'm ending my life not because of a fear of punishment, but rather because I can't stand to live another day without her. I've lost out it says out, but I think they mean our whole future together. Every moment we could have cherished. I'm sorry for everyone's loss. Please do not make life harder for my family. They've lost a son and a daughter, the most wonderful girl in the world. Gabby, I'm sorry. I had killed myself by this creek in hopes that animals may tear me apart, that it may make some sense, that it may make some of her family happy. Please pick up all of my things. Gabby hated people who litter. What? So what is your response to that?
I mean, I just think it's embarrassing that the parents of Brian apparently thought it'd be a good idea to release this letter. It doesn't make them look intelligent at all. The story is nonsensical.
Completely. And I was listening to some journalists talk about this, and they were going back and forth saying, is any of this, it's hard to believe, they were saying, which I think is the kindest way to put this letter, that it's hard to believe. And then they were going back saying, well, could this have actually happened? They were trying to empathize with Brian Laundrie and put themselves in his place, but it still made no sense. I think they were playing devil's advocate, but anything less than this is total nonsense. I think I don't know what else you could say about it. Seems ridiculous to me.
We're going to go over it, though.
Yeah, so, I mean, you want to start? I have some things to say about it.
First page here. So, Gabby, I wish I was right at your side. I wish I could be talking to you right now. I'd be going through every moment, every memory we've made, getting even more excited for the future. I can't live without you. I've lost every day we could have spent together, every holiday. I'll never get to play with unintelligible again. Never go hiking with TJ. I loved you more than anything. I can't bear to look at our photos to recall great times because it is why I cannot go on. When I close my eyes, I will think of laying on the roof of the van, falling asleep to the side of a meteor shower at the Crystal Geyser. I will always love you. So right here, it's like I'm thinking about our future. I'm thinking about these times, but he's talking about playing with somebody and hiking with TJ.
And then his greatest memory, when he's saying that this is the love of his life, it's all about him. But his greatest memory is being alone. Did he say he was alone on the roof of the car? Or was he doesn't say. But his memory is just him on the roof of the car looking at the Crystal Geyser And that's
looking at a meteor shower.
I'm sorry, it's the crystal geyser. Sorry.
Yeah, it's
so
like,
he's that's his. So wouldn't you think of a memory of the two of you, the great memory that you and Gabby had together?
Or at
this
least
is supposed to be that the woman you can't live without. He keeps putting in lines like cliche lines like "I can't live without her. She was the love of my life," like thrown in, but it's not supported by what he's using as examples.
Well, this is something
examples
that
are
you
all
would,
other people and alone in himself.
Yeah, this is something you would put at maybe the end of a letter, and you can say when we fell asleep together, or just the way it's worded. He's like, he's not even getting to the point, right? He's just, if this story is to be believable, it would be the very first thing that you would get into. This is something, it's almost like he's ending the note before it even began.
Yeah, he's just making sure he clicks off all the cliche boxes. Love of my life, can't live without her. Click, done. Make sure we get that in. I mean, this is a note to manage public perception. This is not,
absolutely,
in my opinion, not a real apology, not a real explanation. It's all to manage public opinion of him. And boy, did it fail. So you want to continue on?
I agree. Yeah. If you were reading Gab's journal, looking at the photos from our life together, flipping through old cards, you wouldn't want to live a day without her. Knowing that every day you wake up without her, you wouldn't want to wake up. I'm sorry to everyone this will affect. Gabby was the love of my life, but I know adored by many. I'm so very sorry to her family because I love them. I consider her younger siblings my best of friends. I'm sorry to my family. This is a shock to them as well as terrible grief. Looking at the photos of our life together again, he's got to bring the only time he brings himself into everything, right? It really is about him. So he's always trying to, I don't know. I don't like the way that's worded. Flipping through old cards, you wouldn't want to live a day without her. And what is this? Knowing that every day you wake up without her, you wouldn't want to wake up.
So he switches there. So first he's talking in the first person, and then he changes it to the third person, to you. Right. So he wants the reader to put themselves in his place, and then he talks about, this is a very interesting relationship because they started as YouTubers, right, together, where they were being photographed, and there was a real discrepancy between what they were showing to the public and what we know happened in private, which was that he was abusing her. So he only wants to talk about, he doesn't want the public to know what it was like to know her, do this with her, but to look at pictures, to look at photos, to look at the something superficial. Do you know what I'm saying? An image, a public image of us. Then you know. Not like it's so odd. It's like
odd. He had to have known by this point that we were all watching the video of him and Gabby being pulled over by the police. You know, so of course he's kind of diverting this, and here again he's still not getting to the point. He's not telling us what happened. He's still working out this, he's still like, oh no, I cared about everybody, I'm really sorry. Just ridiculous. Just the way this is worded is just horrible.
He says it's a terrible shock to her family. They're losing their child is a shock. Okay, shock. You got to give them. I'm sure they were in shock. But then it's like grief is like an afterthought there. Oh yeah, and they might have some grief, just a little grief that their daughter has been murdered. Oh, it just makes me so angry.
It's just gross. Okay, so they loved as much, if not more than me. a new daughter to my mother, an aunt to my nephews. Please do not make this harder for them. This occurred as an unexpected tragedy. Rushing back to our car, trying to cross the streams of Spread Creek before it got too dark to see, too cold. I hear a scream and a splash. I could barely see. I couldn't find her for a moment. Shouted her name. I found her breathing heavily, gasping my name. She was freezing cold. We had just came from the blazing hot national parks. Again, this is so dramatic, and it reads nothing like a normal person would tell a story.
No, he's again going from the present tense to the past tense to the present tense, switching in between. And then he says, I hear her scream and I shouted her name. That's awfully passive. Wouldn't you search for her desperately, Brian?
It's just so weird. And he never says that he got her, he picked her up out of the stream, that he was freezing cold as well. No. I don't understand. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like,
because it never happened. But
yeah,
he's tailoring the evidence. He knows that she had a bump on her forehead, probably from him hitting her, and that she was strangled, and that he's got to tailor this evidence in his note with his final story. And this is one of two things that he came up with. I would love to know what the other thing was, but this is the thing that the Laundrie family released to the public to try to
But Roberta, we were told over and over again that he has all this experience in the wilderness, that he goes out hiking and stuff. I mean, I'm not even that much of a rustic gal, and I know you shouldn't be going around when it's starting to get dark, walking around a stream. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you just don't.
How far in the stream? Apparently, everything was very close. That when you know the layout, this doesn't make any sense. The story doesn't make any sense. But the cell phone, that the reception is very good there. So there's no reason why he didn't call for help, and that's something that he never gives any reason for.
No, he never mentions anything about calling 911. There's no reason for that. And then
did he say his family? He wants his family, people to be nice to his family. Is that what he's saying there?
Yeah.
Or is that her family? It's his family.
Please don't make this harder for them.
His family.
It's an unexpected tragedy. Yeah.
Wait, what tragedy is expected? Just let me know in the comment section.
What tragedy is expected? Who knows?
I think if you're expecting it becomes a terrible loss. It becomes something else. But a tragedy, by definition, is something that's sudden and unexpected. No?
I agree.
This guy's not a wordsmith.
I agree. No, he's not very intelligent. Okay, so we just come from the blazing hot national parks in Utah. Okay, well, we get that. The temperature had dropped to freezing and she was soaking wet. I carried her as far as I could down the stream. Where's the part where he's fetching her? Do you know what I'm saying? I went into the water myself, none of this. It dropped to freezing. I carried her as far as I could down the stream toward the car. They were in some van, stumbling, exhausted and shocked when my knees buckled. His knees buckled. And knew I couldn't safely carry her. So then you call 911, you dipshit. I'm sorry. Yeah, I started a fire and spooned her as close to the heat. She was so thin, had already been freezing too long. I couldn't at the time realize that I should have started a fire first, but I wanted her out of the cold back to the car. From where I started the fire, I had no idea how far the car might be.
You know what this made me think of? Tuesday, you know what this made me think of? Remember when they were stopped, the traffic stop that we all saw the police video footage of?
Yeah.
He talked about locking her out of the van to give her time to think.
Right.
Is that something that happened in that last night? Did he lock her out in the freezing cold?
Oh,
Is
really
that
hope
something that
not.
happened before they had some kind of masked fight where he strangled her to death? I just think this juxtaposition between the fire and the freezing cold and her being very thin also made me think, and she was incredibly, very, very, very thin, Gabby Petito.
Yeah,
Was
she
that something that he
was.
demanded? Was he,
I,
or was that something
well,
she demanded of herself? I have no idea.
well, that wouldn't surprise me, because there are abusive men that are like that. They want their women very, very thin. What's interesting is he says that he started a fire and spooned her. Okay, as close to the heat. That's the first thing he says. But then he says later, from where I started. Oh, and then later he says I should have started a fire first.
No, you should have called 911.
Isn't that? But isn't that what he did?
I thought so too. I know. I didn't get. Wait, you should have started a fire first before. You mean before you went swimming?
Before
What are
you
you talking? And then the whole
I,
thing is you don't want to leave the fire alone. You were worried that you didn't want the fire to go out. The fire, keeping Gabby was more important in the heat. But why couldn't they just put her in the van and turn on the heat in the van? I don't even understand this logic to any of this.
And the whole thing of my knees buckled. It's all about him,
Oh yeah.
It's all about his burden that now she has placed upon him.
Him as wimp hero. He can't carry her very far. He can't look for her very well. He can't save her life. He can't help her hardly at all. But he's wimp hero. That's what I'm his new crown him.
He can't do anything. And she'd already been freezing for too long. Well, I mean, if I'm following this story, you're giving me about 10 minutes worth of time. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's obviously still alive. And then it goes on. Only knew it was across the creek. He's talking about the van. When I pull, that's all the further you have to go. Then why not call? Why are you not calling 911? Why are you not? I don't understand that. When I pulled Gabby out of the water, now he's going back. She couldn't tell me what hurt. She had a small bump on her forehead that eventually got larger. How large? Where? What? What are you talking about? Why is it on her forehead? If you fall on rocks, typically, aren't you going backwards? Right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we can talk about that, but her feet hurt. Her wrists hurt. Well, it sounds like you were holding her down.
Down, sure does. Sure does.
But she was freezing, shaking violently. Okay, so here we go. This is where the
violence enters. Right. Here's where
this is where the anger from him comes, because she's the one causing this, right? She's shaking violently while carrying her. She continually made sounds of pain. My God, why don't you just shut up, Gabby? Laying next to her, she said little, gasping between violent shakes, gasping in pain, begging for an end to her pain. She would fall asleep and I would shake her awake, fearing she shouldn't close her eyes if she had a concussion.
Is this really an admission an admission to how he strangled her, that she was begging for her life, that she was shaking, that she was gasping, that he was strangling the life out of her? I mean, think about that sentence. She's shaking, she's begging. She looks like she's about to, that's what that sounds like to me. No?
It sounds like his fantasy, really. The way he's laying this all out. What is the point of this? What is the point of this?
Well, the point is to give him an excuse so the public doesn't think he's a monster, but too late. He thought he could tailor the evidence to this note, and so did the Laundrie family when they released this. They thought this would convince the public that it was just a mistake, as Brian Laundrie puts it. This is how what he calls his love of his life a mistake.
isn't it just much easier to say, I knew that she was in too much pain and I put her out of her misery? Why is this all necessary? Why must you give us all this huge, awful description when you know this is you explaining this, what happened to her parents, her family? He already opened up with, this is the love of my life and what happened, and I care about her and I care about all these people. Why are you including this violent scene? It just seems so macabre, right? It's
Right.
gross.
Very gross.
And then he comes out, and then it continues. She would wake in pain and start the whole painful cycle again, while furious that I was the one waking her. So she's furious with him.
Oh, she couldn't even appreciate that all the things he was doing for her. He was keeping her awake. He saved her life. But see, Gabby Petito wasn't even grateful to
look,
wonderful wimp hero.
Yeah, look how crazy she is, Roberta. Mm-hmm. She's just so crazy. She wouldn't let me try to cross the creek. How is she in charge of this decision?
And she's a nag too. Yeah, she's a nag. And she put demands on me, and she was angry. Yeah.
She thought, like me, that the fire would go out in her sleep and she'd freeze. Okay, wait a minute. You just said she was violently shaking. How is she having any thoughts about this at all?
Oh, that's another thing, is that she did it. She asked to be killed. She did all of this. All the mistakes she made because he was just too compliant. Oh,
it's so unbelievable. I cannot.
Are we almost done?
Understand?
I'm about to explode into rage.
Yeah. I don't know the extent of Gabby's injuries. Only that she was.
How does he not know the extent? He didn't check it out at the scene. He didn't check out what was going on.
I guess not. Life? Well, she probably wouldn't let him. I ended her life. I thought
she was so terrible.
Yeah. I thought it was merciful. That is what she wanted. But I see now all the mistakes I made. I panicked. I was in shock. Oh, I'm glad you were in shock. She's the one that's injured. But from the moment I decided, took away her pain, I knew I couldn't go on without her. I rushed home to spend any time I had left with my family. Oh my God. I wanted to drive north to let James or TJ kill me, but I wouldn't want them to spend time in jail over my mistake, even though I'm sure they would have. I'm sure they would have liked to. I am ending my life not because of fear of punishment, but rather because I can't stand to live another day without her. I've lost our whole future together, every moment we could have cherished. I'm sorry for everyone's loss. Please don't make life harder for my family. They lost a son and a daughter. The most wonderful girl in the world, Gabby. I'm sorry.
Don't be mad at his family. Nothing about her family.
Nothing about her family.
Read that final line about
I killed myself. Yeah, I killed myself by this creek. Really? In the hopes that animals may tear me apart, that it may make some of her family happy. Please pick up all my things. Gabby hated people who litter.
Okay, so
wow.
So if that's true,
wow.
So he's saying that the ultimate punishment for someone you don't like is to leave them to the elements for animals to eat.
Yeah.
How did he leave Gabby Petito? Exactly that way.
Yeah.
So he's just expressing that he really even in death. He wants us to know how much he hated her.
This is the love of your life, and you drive all the way across the country? And don't say anything to anybody?
So he wasn't littering by leaving Gabby Petito's body out there?
I would call that littering.
I would call that littering
too,
but more than littering, to call it absolute disrespect. Okay, but say all this happened. Why couldn't he bring her body back in the van and return it to at least his parents that he cared so much about? Why couldn't he return the body of his parents' daughter? He didn't give any... Right? Why wouldn't you throw her in the back of the van and bring her home?
I mean, the least you could do is drop drop it off anonymously at night or something. It doesn't make any sense to just leave her out there and then drive all the way across the country using her credit card, coming home, going to a storage unit, because I had forgotten about that, and I went back over some stuff, and they use a storage unit. They go camping together with his family.
Yep.
Remember that? There was like a weekend they went away for that. Then he comes back, and now all of a sudden we find out the FBI found this note, and the parents want this released because they think this is somehow going to satiate the public and her family. Are you mad?
Right. But in the reporting of the story, we also found out about another letter that the Laundrie family, I would think, would not want to be released. And let's listen to this one.
Welcome back. For months, it has been assumed that Brian Laundrie took his secrets to the grave, but we now know that is not true. Pages of Laundrie's notebook were finally released to the public today by the Laundrie family attorney, Stephen Bertolino. The FBI had already said that Laundrie confessed in those pages to killing Gabby, and he does. But he also left a detailed, almost minute-by-minute description of Gabby's final moments and what he claims he was thinking the entire time, including this passage, which reads, "I ended her life. I thought it was merciful. That is what she wanted, but I see now all the mistakes I made. I panicked. I was in shock. But from the moment I decided, took away her pain, I knew I couldn't go on without her." But brace yourselves, because the notebook was not the only bombshell dropped today. A little while ago, I spoke with the lawyer for the Petito family. He says there are several other pieces of evidence in the possession of the Laundrie's attorney, Stephen Bertolino, including a letter from Roberta Laundrie to her son, Brian. Here is some of what he told me.
Someone should ask him to release the letter that Roberta Laundrie wrote to Brian Laundrie. That on the envelope says, "Burn after you read this."
So there was a letter from Roberta to Brian within the notebook?
No, it was not within the notebook. It was a separate letter.
That was found out there with the notebook, though?
My understanding is that the letter at one point had been in the van, but then it was taken from the Laundrie home during the time when the search warrant was executed.
So a letter from Roberta to Brian that said, "Burn this letter," after you read it. And were you able to read the letter?
Yes, I was. I'll tell you that I had an idea what was in the letter before I read it. I knew about the letter. I don't believe Mr. Bertolino knew about the letter, and the surprise on his face was very interesting as he read that letter.
That was
all
today.
I can say. He has the letter. He has the original of the letter. And I've asked him to maintain that for purposes of the litigation. I don't have a copy of it. I expect I'll be getting a copy of it. He wouldn't allow me to get a copy of it today. But within that letter is an offer from Roberta Laundrie to assist her son. I don't want to say more because I don't have the letter, but it's a pretty interesting, pretty odd letter.
So a letter from Roberta to Brian to assist her son, assist him to do what?
Let me back up and say there's no date on the letter. But it would appear that the letter was written between the time that Gabby was murdered and Brian committed suicide. There's scenarios presented by Roberta in that letter. For example, if you go to jail, I'll bake a cake and I'll put a knife in it or a saw in it. There was also something referenced in that letter about Gabby, and I'd rather not go any further. That at this point, the letter will speak for itself, and I don't want to paraphrase incorrectly what the letter said.
I understand. I just want to make sure I can report it correctly. So was she sort of offering to help him kill himself? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay.
No. It was as I said, it was an offer that had to do with Gabby.
After she was already dead.
That's my belief.
And you can't say anything more about what that offer was?
I'm not comfortable without having it in front of me because I'll be paraphrasing, and I don't want to paraphrase something that serious.
Wow, very, very interesting there. Patrick Riley also told me that the notebook is not the only confession Brian left. He told me today there was a second confession on a, quote, digital device and possibly a third confession in written form. Riley says he has not seen those confessions yet, but the FBI told him they are somewhat different from the confession in the notebook that we've seen. It is a lot to take in.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.
Oh, we lost Roberta, so I apologize for that. Here we are.
My apologies.
Okay, there we go.
So I just thought that bombshell was fascinating. That there's so essentially everything that we thought was going on. That the Laundries were helping their son escape justice and offering, if you go to prison, we'll somehow send you a file so you can get out of prison and you can be a fugitive from the law. I mean, what kind of parenting is that?
I don't. This is Chris Watts level of stupid with this family.
Yeah,
just the absolute creepiness and refusal to deal in reality. But I am curious as to, what went on, what took place when he got home, and he came home without her in her van.
Right. And why is she writing him a letter? I guess she wrote him a letter and she's saying, this is incriminating, burn after reading.
Yeah.
And my understanding is what Bertolino, the Laundrie's lawyer, is saying is that no, burn after reading. When she wrote that, when Roberta Laundrie wrote that on the front of the envelope, she was really referencing the 2008 movie. So once again, we have a kind of making a murderer. It was all from a book defense, a kind of Johnny Depp just is quoting a Monty Python sketch when he's saying he wants to burn and rape Amber Heard's corpse.
So he's admitting, so he's admitting that this family lives in a world of books and movies.
I don't know. I think that he's hoping that because to the younger generation, burn after reading, letters aren't really a thing. They're in the email generation. So burn after reading to them is a movie. But for us old people who remember,
we know exactly what it means.
Burn after reading on a letter, man, this is incriminating. Get rid of this. Right. So I just think that the whole timing of this is very interesting. Now, Pat Riley, the Gabby Petito's parents' lawyer, had a hearing on Wednesday where he fought a dismiss motion by the Laundries to dismiss their lawsuit, which is a civil lawsuit for emotional distress, for their lawyer releasing a statement saying, I hope they find Gabby, when they were searching in a different place that they were found. They knew she wasn't there. And they also knew she wasn't alive. And they said that it was a very interesting hearing. I encourage people to watch it. I don't think it has a chance. It really a chance of ever going to trial. I think the judge sounded very skeptical. I'll be very surprised if he doesn't grant this motion to dismiss. But what it brought to light is morally, they were absolutely in the wrong. But legally, he hadn't been charged with a crime yet. You can't even say this is not a criminal suit, but you can't even say He hadn't even been charged with her credit card yet, I believe, at that time of that statement of stealing her credit card, that I think that they were within the bounds of the law. But if it goes to trial, it will be a fascinating trial and a first of its kind. If that goes forward, it'll be very interesting. But so the Laundries, in retaliation, released this notebook letter. I mean, retaliation meaning they wanted sympathy. I don't mean it was like retaliatory or meant to be hurtful. I can't say that I know that. They just released this letter to try to win the public sympathy, and I think it really backfired. And then the Petito's lawyer reminded the public of how these parents aided their child to not face responsibility for murdering Gabby Petito.
If this other letter is real, I would think that they would be able to criminally charge them with aiding and abetting a fugitive.
Right.
Something along those lines. Because it does seem as though you kind of have to have that criminal element there before you could go forward with a civil case. But it's very unfortunate, and I just can't imagine being the Petitos, and what they're going through, the parents, because this letter, if they're trying to make it seem like this is something real, that they actually believe this scenario, or they expect the public to believe this scenario, it's insulting, and it's just cruel, because obviously this is not at all realistic. And even when we talked before, if something happens to somebody in an accident like this, they were at a camping grounds. They could have easily found somebody else to reach out to the police while he stayed with her, or someone calls an ambulance, or it would have taken less than a half hour. She could still be alive.
Yeah.
There's just no excuse for this.
None. And it really, it's very interesting to see at this civil hearing. The Petitos were there in attendance. They're divorced and remarried to other people, but they're there as showing a united front. Appeared as a couple. I mean, I don't mean as a couple together. I just meant together.
Right.
And the Laundries are not there. To me, it was symbolic of the way the Laundries protect themselves when it's about them. They go to action when it's about Gabby Petito. They're not interested. It's just it's a selfish family, in my opinion.
I agree.
At
very
minimum,
selfish.
At minimum, that's the nicest thing I can say, I think.
Right. Very selfish and just very, like I said, just cruel, just absolutely cruel what they've put this family through. And I guess I do understand that, it's probably not going to go forward, unfortunately. But boy, oh boy, it'd be nice if they had to answer some questions or something. It just looks like they lawyered up right away and have avoided answering anything for this family. And they obviously knew something happened. I want to know how much they knew about the fighting and the abuse.
Yeah.
Because they lived there. These two lived there with them. Yeah. I believe there were neighbors that said they had heard fights and arguments going on. Mm-hmm. So the tumultuous relationship seemed to be well known.
Yeah.
And of course we have the video when they were pulled over, and I think was it Moab, Utah. And we have him acting as if, he's just this nice guy, Roberta, and we
got in trouble. The last time we were talking about this, we got in a lot of trouble with some of the listeners who were saying, you don't understand, she's abusive, she's the abusive one. And being really upset with us for calling out what we saw as especially you, Tuesday, really zeroed in on a lot of the behavior as typical of domestic violence situation But there's lots of people saying, oh no, men can get abused too. Doesn't this sound like a familiar conversation that's been in the public debate lately?
Sounds very familiar. Sounds very
Right.
familiar.
Men can be abused too. She was crazy. You don't understand.
Yeah.
And Urban Infidel is bringing up the fact that the Petito family was calling the Laundries, and the Laundries wouldn't answer, cut them off. I've heard that they were blocked. I don't know if that's true, that they blocked them or they just didn't answer. I've heard both.
Well, it sounds like his own sister was cut off. Because remember, they went to her house and she finally came out and said, look, I don't know what's going on. You know, this is my sister-in-law. You know, she seemed to love Gabby very much. Her children bonded with Gabby. And she kind of made it clear there at the end that her parents weren't even talking to her. So something really weird and sinister is wrong with this family, just in general. And I fear that we're never going to get the answers that we want because of this secrecy and this shutdown. And like I said, and they've cut off their own daughter, it sounds like. So
it's interesting. The family dynamic is very interesting. And does anyone have any questions before we wrap this up? Is there anything that we didn't talk about? Hi, Witchy XX. I mean, it's just very interesting every time we talk about this. Last time I was not ready for the furor in the comment section that you're wrong. You don't know. She's crazy. She's out of control. Watch the behavior panel. They've never apologized for that. Their take that she was crazy and abusive, and they were using her body language as examples.
Well, not only was she so abusive, Roberta, when she fell and hit her head, she was violently shaking and screaming at him. I mean, he just had no choice, Roberta.
Yeah.
He had no choice. But to just put
he acts like
out
she's
of misery.
I was saying to you before we started, he acts like he's in a Western and she's 103 years old and they only have enough supplies. They can't take her to the next camp. They have to just end her right there. We don't have enough supplies for you to carry on. She's 22 years old.
That's why I said, bring out your dad.
Right. Bring out
your dad. He's not dead yet. Oh, he's got to be dead when you coming around next Thursday.
I mean, I appreciate that journalists are trying to really look at all sides and try to think, is there any way that any part of this could be the truth? But come on, let's call a spade a spade. This is absolute nonsense, this letter. And anyone who believes any part of this letter really happened, I mean, in the narrative, as a true narrative, is that this led to her death, that some kind of fall led to her death. I mean, this is like the cliche, she fell down the stairs, except we don't have any stairs. We have a raging river and a rock here. Excuse.
Yeah, do you think
and maybe Michael Peterson is thinking, oh, I should have just said that. Maybe I had to end. She fell down the stairs and I had to end her life because I don't know, the phones weren't working. I don't know what, because there's no reason why Michael Peterson's a lot smarter than Brian Laundrie. The reason you didn't say that because there's no reason why you wouldn't call for help.
You would call for help. Do you think that he and his parents may have tried to work this story out? Because it sounds like he has another confession they alluded to.
Right.
Like there might be a few more versions.
2 more. Yeah.
Yeah. So are they helping him work out a narrative to explain this? Is that what they were doing? And then he wrote this one out completely, apparently. And then he finally just decided, maybe he realized it was just so stupid and it wasn't going to.
It seems like the family dynamic is that they clean up his messes. They help him out. And it's looked like from what we hear from that letter that Roberta Laundrie was willing to have him go to prison and somehow find a way to get him out. Maybe had he gone to prison, Roberta Laundrie would have been the head of some free Brian Laundrie movement with Kim Kardashian and someone else. I don't know.
Right. The merciful killer.
I mean, I don't think he would have done the time that we would have wanted, because it's one of those things. Well, common sense tells you this probably happened, but what you can prove and what state her body was in, I know that's really grim, but what they could prove with a trial, had it gone there, he might have lead to something lesser, and he might have not done the time that. But I don't think they wanted.
Yeah,
I don't think that was really. This is a family of image, right? The pictures, the video. I don't think they would have liked that. They need an innocent. They need him to be the good guy. They need him to have the mask.
I agree. And the other thing though is, all you have to do is get somebody on the jury if you give them some plausible sob story, or well, I don't think this is plausible, but I mean, we see juries they don't know how to analyze things. They don't know how to think critically about things. And you just get that one person that wants to provide the benefit of the doubt every step of the way. And they'll do any mental gymnastics to arrive at the conclusion they want to arrive at. And that's all they need.
Yep.
And the next thing you know, he's off completely. So I think you're right. I think it's really hard to prove something like that, especially when you got this goofy sob story.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was a manipulator all the way to the end. I think I'm going to end it here. Tuesday, you've done double duty. We just recorded another episode. Just for the Patreons, you've done double duty this weekend. Thank you so much for doing it.
Heck yes.
I really appreciate it. And I always enjoy these conversations. Thank you so much. To all the Patreon supporters, please like, share, and subscribe this episode. And I'll see you back next time. All right. Have a great week, guys.